You see, the darkness, it only came because we let the fathers, the monsters, we let them rule. But now, all we have to do is make a bridge.
Hello, sup, you mind freaks. Haas here to give a couple of quick notes up top. This episode features a brief update from Kristi Yamaguccimane, but I promise the second half of the interview I did with him will be up in just a few days. As you'll hear, I recently stumbled into some free time. This episode is mostly me riding solo. I edited it down quite a bit, and I'm definitely going to make future mini-sodes a little shorter and more focused. Please bear with me as I get my sea legs on this. The book about mass incarceration and over-policing in the United States that I believe I mentioned at one point, unless I edited that part out. Anyway, I put this in this intro note thing anyway, so the book is Misdemeanorland by Issa Kohler-Hausman. I believe I'm pronouncing that right. Well, actually, I have no idea if I'm pronouncing that right, but it's Issa Kohler-Hausmann. I'll put that in the show notes, but that is Misdemeanorland. Very good book. Highly recommend it, and I'll be talking about that more in future episodes and probably outlining some of the crazy stuff from that book in a YouTube video coming up. So since recording this episode, I have also started rereading A People's History of the United States. Actually, I think I mentioned that in this episode, so I had just kind of started it, but that's the Howard Zinn book, and it was so much more impactful and interesting through the lens of adulthood. Definitely going to be going more in depth with that, and I cannot recommend it enough. Also, if you want to support this podcast, my YouTube channel, and or my music, please go to thekmax.bandcamp.com. That link is also in the show notes. Buy one or more of the albums there, or just some individual songs. You can name your own price. The episode of the podcast, this episode of this podcast ends with one of our songs, the title track from our 2010 EP, Tobacco and Firearms. So if you like it, again, that's thekmacks.bandcamp.com. That's thekmacks.bandcamp.com. Check out my old band's music, and I'm going to be putting up some new stuff soon, probably on my YouTube channel, and maybe opening up a new Bandcamp for a new little project that guitar player and I are working on called... Well, here's the debut of what the title of that. I think we're going to call it Technically Music, and it's going to be cool. Anyway, please subscribe, rate, and review the show. Even if you don't like it, as I said in the first episode, just to be nice. I'm a pretty nice guy, so just give us a 5-star review and, write a review. Say some nice things. Follow me on Twitter at Haas_Bossman. Check out the Haas Bossman YouTube channel. Subscribe to that. Leave me a voicemail if you want to be played on the show or ask me a question. A link to that is also in the show notes for this episode. Now, we're riding into the show on the wings of my contemporary pop country alter ego, Durrell Grishaw, with a never before heard song, the international debut of Make America Country Again. I wanted to do this because I recorded the main audio of this episode on July 4th, but today we'll have to do. And don't forget to flood a fellow human soul with healing light today. Tomorrow at the very latest.
Each and every folks is strapping on them boots, flying the flag of Dixieland and honoring their roots, slopping hogs, yelling go dogs, and baling up some hay. As the eagle soars a dear little roars, you can hear the people say, make America country again. Go tell your ma and them from sea to shining sea. We're sipping on sweet tea, so let me hear you yell, rednecks and southern bells, if you ain't gone fish here. Make America country again.
All right, who am I calling out this week? Sorry Hat. That one is, that's at sorry_hat. He is an artist. Recently, very graciously, did some work for me, which I will be debuting soon. I actually debuted one image on my Twitter, at Haas_Bossman. This is Haas Bossman, by the way. And last week, on episode 1, I believe I called out Mock Swagger, the honor of the first call-out. That is a little bit more complicated of a Twitter name. I'm going to have to read that off. It is at Marsen7375_Mark. That's MARSAN 7375_Mark. Mock Swagger, spelled MOKSWAGGER. And again, sorry, Hat, I'm calling you out. We're going to the mat. We're going to meet at the K&K after school. That's where where I grew up, that's what people used to say when they were going to fight. We're going to meet at the K&K. It's about a half mile down the road from the high school. And we saw a lot of really lame, mostly pretty boring fights break out there, but also a couple of kind of almost traumatizing fights. I think violence is never okay, folks, unless you are being threatened with violence yourself or protecting someone else from violence, in which case I think it can be justified. And sometimes is morally required. Anyhow, that's enough of my armchair political philosophy. Folks, this is Haas Bossman coming at you for the first mini-sode of Breadsheet, this podcast. Couple things I want to, just some stuff I want to get going up top. Welcome, everybody. I am still working on editing the second half of the two-parter first episode, an interview with the great Kristi Yamaguccimane, TDZ, a.k.a. King. I kept saying his old handle in that last episode, and at the time that we recorded and at the time that it was released, it was his handle. However, he has a new one now. I'm not going to say it because of some weird stuff that happened. I have a recording coming up in just a couple minutes of Mr. Yamaguccimane, whom I did a quick little 10, 15-minute convo with and just edited it down to some of the pertinent details. Don't want to go into too much detail myself on that because he got effed by some Twitter weirdos, and we don't want people coming after him again. So folks listening to this, as long as this is still a underground podcast, do not make a big thing out of it. Just know that if you haven't heard from Kristi Yamaguccimane in a while, he did recently get nuked by some weirdos, some ding-dongs, if you will, and he doesn't want to make a big thing out of it. Just kind of had to start clean, though. His account didn't just get suspended, it got destroyed, and as did his, I think, other accounts. So he had to start a new one. So, guys, look for Kristi Yamaguccimane. If you haven't heard from him in a while, I will let him explain the kind of crazy weirdness that happened there. It really did kind of concern me for a minute there. But, those of you who know what happened or, know that something happened there, you will get a little bit of elucidation from the man himself, Kristi Yamaguccimane. I can hear myself in the headphones, and it's fun to go a little deeper. Okay, so the reason that first podcast episode is taking a while, I'm going to try to summarize this as quickly as possible because it is kind of a technical thing, but I think it's actually kind of interesting. I've been a musician for many, many years. I started off when I was about 12 years old when I first started playing and writing songs and stuff. First started experimenting with recording when my parents got me a $100 Tascam 4-track cassette recorder for a Crimbus, I believe, when I was maybe 13, 14, and I've been just recording stuff in my bedroom. All right, just patching myself in here. Folks, I apologize for the diminished sound quality here, but just want to record a quick little voice memo just to let y'all know. I did record a 10, 15 minute explanation of why the episode was taking so long, and upon listening to it again, realized that it is very boring if you are not someone who is explicitly interested in sound engineering and mixing and whatnot. So, suffice it to say, we recorded the episode remotely. wound up with 2 files, one that was just my voice in high sound quality, one that was just me and Kristi Yamaguccimane both on the same track, so I couldn't separate them from one another. Wound up mixing files, sounded all weird, and so difficult process. Just suffice it to say that I do have that recording still. I might tag it onto the episode, the very end of the episode with Kristi Yamaguccimane, maybe after it's pretended to end completely, just because I think people will tune out listening to that because it probably is boring to most people. So just wrapping up saying here after the explanation of why it was taking so long, that I might start doing some ads, but I'm going to try to make them as unobtrusive as possible, and I won't do any evil corporations or anything like that. Y'all can trust me. This is Haas. All right, now back to the better recording, regularly scheduled program. That's another reason it's taking me so long, is because I have to also work, and I work a job under capitalism, so it chews me up and spits me out every single day, and I'm almost always too exhausted to do anything once I get home. Or once I finish work for the day. We've been working from home since the pandemic hit, but still, I thought that would make things less stressful, but it's actually things have gotten worse. But that'll be over soon, and I'll be looking for new sources of income. So I'm going to have to try to, I guess, squeeze a little bit out of the podcast and maybe my YouTube channel. If that is a thing that's in the cards, I promise I will make it as unobtrusive as possible, and I will never sell out. I will never be dishonest. I will never try to get anybody to use a product or service that I think is in any way damaging, though. Of course, we all know there is no ethical consumption under capitalism, so we all have to participate in some way or another. One great quote I've heard about that, you guys have probably all seen the cartoon, the little comic of the guy saying, you criticize capitalism, and yet you participate in capitalism. I am very intelligent. You guys know that cute little comic. Well, I believe it was Dr. Chris Ryan, which I am going to bring up probably on today's edition of a new segment that we're going to be doing for the first time, which you will hear debuted shortly. It's going to be the kind of main portion of the show, I think. But I heard that from, believe it was Dr. Chris Ryan, who is an awesome author. He co-wrote the book Sex at Dawn. More recently, he released a book called Civilized to Death. I would recommend both of them highly. And Chris Ryan, he once said, I believe it was something along the lines of telling somebody that they, can't criticize capitalism while also owning an iPhone, for instance, is like saying you can't criticize the fact that there's air pollution if you also breathe air. We all have to participate in the system to some degree to survive and to have any kind of joy that we can squeeze out of this miserable life as possible, within reason. We have to participate in capitalism because that happens to be the system we were born into, but we can still criticize it. We can still criticize it fervently and still work to try and change it completely, as would be my case, and probably some of the folks listening. Open to all ideas, though, of course. Now, okay, so that adds the reason that the episode, you are going to find that I go on lots of tangents, which is why I have to edit these podcasts or they will be a rambling mess. I think I'm doing okay today, though. I'm going on the tangents, but I think I'm still sort of following logic and coming back to what I was talking about. So that's not bad. I just drank some cold brew. Shout out to Chris Crofton. That's at The Crofton Show on Twitter. Inspired me to get this cold brew, so I'm a little jacked at the moment. It's also a reasonable hour, and I got a full night's sleep. It's the 4th of July as I'm recording this. So, that's interesting. Probably going to eat some food today to celebrate. Speaking of Kristi Yamaguccimane, the man, the myth, the legend himself was gracious enough to do just a little bit more with me. And I also recorded through the crappy mic on this. I'm not going to bother patching myself in. You might not even hear any of my end on this. And so he just gave a little explanation of what happened to him. Again, don't make a big deal out of this, but for your edification, folks who are listening, this is what happened with Kristi Yamaguccimane from the Gooch's mouth himself.
Once we start recording. Anyway, let's just go. You can put like a funny effect on my voice or something, or like distort my voice or some shit and make it sound like I'm on 60 Minutes, like, you know, giving out secrets from big tobacco companies or some shit.
So what's the deal, man? Like, did you get like attacked a la like James Gunn or somebody like that?
So yes, but for what I deem far less problematic tweets. Basically what happened is I helped out with a podcast called Lauer After Hours. It's a very niche podcast centered around a radio show called the Dan Le Batard Show. And it's just a bunch of fans just kind of contributing. And I tweeted at, I replied to a tweet, this ESPN reporter who was covering the Bubba Wallace story about the noose in the garage. And he was very harsh on NASCAR, or not harsh on NASCAR, but harsh on basically the culture around a NASCAR that led to this being a very real possibility. Now, you know, the story came out, they checked over 1,100 garages, and only, I think like something like 11 or 17 had actual loops as the pull down for the garage door, and only one out of the entire, like all 28 something tracks in NASCAR, only one had that noose. But that's beside the point. I just replied to him and say, hey, would you come on, you know, if you have any time in the next few weeks, would you be willing to come on and do like, you know, 15, 20 minutes just breaking down the differences? Now, mind you, I'm a white Southerner, okay? And I asked him, would you mind breaking down the differences between a redneck, good old boy, hillbilly, and hick? And then I linked to an episode of this podcast, Lauer After Hours. And within about 15 minutes, I suddenly, my tweet was reported, and then a little bit after that, my account got suspended. And I got the email, and it showed that specific tweet, and I tried replying to it, or appealing it rather, multiple times. I think I tried 3 times, and they just ended up nuking my account completely. So that's what happened literally over the words redneck, hillbilly, hick, or good old boy. But I just thought it would be a funny bit. The reporter, Marty Smith, he's he's got a very southern twang to him. He lives up around Charlotte. And that's my suspicion, at least, is that angry NASCAR fans who have been pissed off with Marty over the past couple weeks while he's been covering the story, either they saw my tweet or I don't know. Honestly, that's the only thing I can figure out that it would have been, is just pissed off people at Marty just deciding because I wasn't coming at him with some kind of like anger in my tweet, they decided to go after me as well. And just so everybody's clear, I know for a fact, like it said I got permabanned or my account got suspended for attacking basically like a protected class, like an ethnicity, race, gender, sexual orientation, religion, etc. So unless Southern is an ethnicity now, I have no idea, no clue what Twitter is talking about. And the fact that they, I appealed 3 times and they upheld it every time just kind of blew my mind.
That is some bullshit, man. I saw there was one other thing. I saw that like Ass Warfare also got taken down.
Correct. So I think I don't even remember. I was so confused that I tried to log into my secondary account, which I had not made. Granted, like I've had that account for a while now, the secondary account, and I guess I thought I was confirming my phone number for my original account. And I think I confirmed it for the secondary one, and that got hit as well. So they took that one down too.
Damn, yeah, that was the part that kind of like I thought was especially weird. Was like, damn, is he like trying to start new accounts and they keep getting taken down every time?
Yeah. So the first account got hit, and then within about 20 to 30 minutes, the second one got hit as well. So I would love for a tech journalist to do, to get basically to talk to someone higher up at Twitter, like about their violation of rules, to find out, like, are you not allowed to say one of those words? It seems so absurd. Like those, like, I grew up, again, like, I'm a white Southerner. We jokingly call each other hicks all the time, or hillbilly or redneck. Like, it's never ever been a sign of offense to us. I never even crossed my mind that could get me kicked off. So yeah, it sucks, but I'm back, kinda, so to speak. I don't want to say too much about it.
All right, man. Well, I'm going to let you get back to picking up dinner, but have a wonderful night, man. Thanks for taking the time out to talk.
Absolutely, Hoss. Anytime, man.
All right, later, Mr. Yamaguccimane.
Later.
Peace. All right, that was Kristi Yamaguccimane with his explanation. I hope that helps. Once more, please do not do anything that might bring attention to it. Just if you're listening to this, you probably also follow me on Twitter, and that's what happened there. So, yeah. Ow! Here we go. I'm going to now talk about what I've been up to since the last episode dropped. And you know what that means, folks. It is time for an episode of Hoss Recommends. Okay, for this first episode of Hoss Recommends, I want to try and indoctrinate you. I'm calling this Dipping Your Toes into Leftism, an evening with Hoss Bossman. I'm going to recommend some lefty stuff that I think is cool and fun and informative. Just a thing or two in each category. Please reach out to me on Twitter. That's at Hoss_Bossman with recommendations for this section and everything else. Anything else. I'm starting with music because I'm a longtime musician. Really is my first love, and that's what got me interested in lefty politics in the first place. Certainly, music isn't the best place to learn most hard information, but art and poetry can express the importance, the urgency, and the beauty of certain ideas like nothing else quite can. I'll definitely go into what specific artists, songs, and albums first got me interested in some of these ideas in future episodes if people like what is coming out here. But right out of the gate here, I am going to recommend what I think is one of the most well-executed political albums ever by a band that definitely lit the eternal flame of radicalism within me with their earlier work, but this is a newer album of theirs. Actually, it's their newest album, and it is called Victory Lap by a band called Propagandhi. Anybody who knows me has heard me talk about this band. I love them. They're an amazing band. Propagandhi also have one of the best band names ever, especially for a political punk band. Probably the band I listen to more than any other. Recommending this one because it's their newest album, like I said, and they're a band that never stops evolving and pushing the limits of their technical, songwriting, lyrical abilities. Those of you who are into the Fat Records, Epitaph, Lookout, Nitro, Kung Fu Records. There's some other big labels from that era that I'm probably missing, but during the punk, the pop punk, skate punk, ska punk sort of heyday of the late 90s and early 2000s, and if you had some of the dirt cheap compilations that those labels put out, you might be familiar with one or more of their Propagandhi, that is, one of their first free album. Yeah, excuse me. One or more of their first 3 albums. How to Clean Everything, Less Talk, More Rock, and Today's Empires, Tomorrow's Ashes. Specifically, I remember the opening track from their first album, How to Clean Everything. It's called Anti-Manifesto, being fairly well known because of its inclusion on a Fat Records compilation, Life in the Fat Lane, Live Fat, Die Young, one of those. And there's a great documentary about this era, actually, called 1994. I'm not sure where you can watch it right now, but used to be on YouTube. Maybe it's still there. So, Propagandhi, my friend Max and I used to love Propagandhi's first 3 albums, especially their first one. But I didn't really keep up with their new releases the way that I did with my favorite bands from that era, like Bad Religion and NoFX, both of which are still kicking. My understanding is that the guys in Propagandhi are big metalheads, and as they became better and better musicians, their 90s skate punk sound kind of started taking a back seat to their more technically proficient influences. And I think they're big Rush guys, too. They got heavier and, frankly, more interesting from a technical perspective. Musically, that is. Lyrically, I would also say they got more interesting, though. Their more prosaic approach in their earlier stuff. Like they were kind of like a wonkier Anti-Flag lyrically, and a more sort of aggressive and irreverent Anti-Flag in ways. But that kind of more prosaic style of writing songs, I think I heard this guy from Propaganda, this singer, say something about he was just writing songs about the COINTELPRO papers back then or something like that. So there were songs like about specific CIA coups, burning the flag, the IMF, the World Bank, NAFTA, WTO, stuff like that, really specific and, like I said, prosaic songs. That approach gave way to a more poetic, sort of personal, universal approach, using a broader toolkit to explore themes that are ultimately political or socio-political, delving more into history and using imagery from science and anthropology and all kinds of stuff to express interesting views and show interesting perspectives on a lot of these really complex issues. Very good. Very awesome stuff. And when they started taking this turn into a more sophisticated artistic style, I don't think I was positioned to appreciate it. So I think I heard some of those albums when they were sort of taking this more sophisticated turn and wasn't really too interested in them. And so I rediscovered Propaganda when they released Victory Lap in 2017. That's the album I'm recommending today, and I was blown away when I really gave it a chance. The opening 3 tracks, I think, constitute some of the best political commentary of this totally bizarre, traumatic national nightmare we've been experiencing these past few years. Sort of rightfully, I'd say, framing it as an extension of everything that we out here on the political fringes have been trying to call everybody's attention to for a long, long time. The title / opening track laments our bizarrely bleak times with, I think, this beautiful, really trademark sardonicness of the Propaganda songwriting style, the lyrical stylings. They just have this kind of cutting and the sense of contempt that I really love in their lyrics, and also sort of in the delivery of their main singer, Chris Hanna, and I think he's also their chief songwriter. Anyway, the second track, called Comply/Resist, or is it Resist/Comply? Anyway, track 2 uses the text of a sort of open letter essay. There's a real essay by Christopher Hitchens that was written in the early 90s. The actual words of this actual piece to assume the voice of an apologist for Western colonialism, sort of attempting and failing miserably to justify the horrors inflicted upon the natives of the Americas. The refrain in the song, or the closest thing the song has to a chorus, states a very sad truth. It's comply, resist, no difference. Resist, comply, you die. Kind of draws a parallel between the shameless and duplicitous mistreatment and mass murder of the natives of the Americas and the modern injustices inflicted upon people of color on the very same land by the very same government, using many of the very same sort of excuses and techniques and doublespeak and that sort of thing. The third track on that album, like I said, the first 3 tracks I think encapsulate our times very well. But I guess this is a good time for me to transition. I won't go into the third track right now because of the next thing I'm going to briefly recommend. There is a new podcast about this very band of which I speak called Unscripted Moments, a podcast about Propaganda, hosted by 2 very knowledgeable gentlemen, intelligent Propaganda superfan teachers, as it were. I used to be a teacher, as I'll probably talk about in the future. I was an high school English teacher. This is a very small podcast. Again, it's Unscripted Moments, a podcast about Propaganda. It's a small, brand new show. I think they are doing fantastic work. So if you like Propaganda, or if this fire edition of Haas Recommends inspires you to explore their catalog and you inevitably fall in love with them, please check out that podcast. That's Unscripted Moments, a podcast about Propaganda. They did an episode about track 3 from Victory Lap. I think it's the only one that they've done on a song from this album so far, but it's a pretty new show. I think they're only 6 episodes in at this point. The song's called Cop Just Out of Frame. They have a real-life historian on this episode of the show to illuminate and elaborate on the sort of central metaphor or source of imagery in the song. Quang Duc, who was a Buddhist monk, a South Vietnamese Buddhist monk who famously committed self-immolation or burned himself alive in protest of the U.S.-aligned Christian South Vietnamese government. I could be getting some of this historical. These are very broad details, but I don't. If I am getting any wrong, I apologize. But they were oppressing the Buddhists in the country at the time. This monk Quang Duc, he is on the cover of a Rage Against the Machine album. It's a very famous photo. Just listen to the episode of the show to learn about it from a real historian, and also listen to Victory Lap by Propagandhi. Oh, and Propagandhi podcast dudes. I'm not going to say this explicitly. I'm just going to put the idea out there and float it that I'm a big Propagandhi fan. I'm a former English teacher. I know how to talk about poetry, and I'm a songwriter, and I know about music theory and stuff. I'm mostly self-taught, but hey, I like talking about this stuff, and hey, you're listening right now. I can talk. I'm saying things into a microphone. I think somebody like me might be pretty good at being a guest on a Propagandhi episode or on an episode of a Propagandhi podcast. So just saying that would be cool, but I'm not going to ask because that would be like thirsty as hell, and I'm not a thirsty man. I'm quite quenched. And yeah, so I spent way too much time on Victory Lap just now. So real quick, I will recommend more fun lefty stuff. Next time I'll go, maybe I'll do that from now on. I'll go kind of more in-depth, sort of like I did with Victory Lap just now. I know that wasn't like really in-depth, but, break it down a little bit more, and then I'll kind of go a little quicker like I'll try to do with these next few things. As you can hear, once you pull my string, it's kind of, I'll go for a while. So, all right, here we go. I'm going to I have this little bullet list outline. I'm going to stick to it as closely as I can. Next, podcast for dipping your toe into leftism. This one is on the more mainstream, polished side of things, but it's a fantastically produced show hosted by a great progressive reporter from The Intercept named Mehdi Hassan. It's called Deconstructed. The episodes are a manageable length, and it usually opens with a monologue by Hassan or Hassan. Sorry, I always want to say it as Hassan, because I know that name is pronounced that way, maybe in some regions or just by some people. But then it's followed by an interview with usually somebody very awesome. So, like I said, it's manageable length, like 30 to 40 minutes usually. It's a great, informative podcast. And also, if you want something funny, laid back, kind of more of a hang, but also pretty informative, definitely check out The Daily Zeitgeist if you haven't already been doing that. It's hosted by Jack O'Brien, former editor-in-chief of Cracked. I was a big Cracked head back in the day. A little bit of a cracked freak, as they used to call us. And it's also got this hilarious dude named Miles Gray, who's really cool. I stole the opening questions, actually, from my interview on that last episode of Breadsheet, the interview with Kristi Yamaguccimane on the last episode of Breadsheet, this show, which is also the first episode of this show, Breadsheet, from that show. And I know that many listeners of Breadsheet, this show, came over from The Daily Zeitgeist, which I will talk more about on the next episode of Breadsheet, which is, I guess, this show. When I introduce the long-anticipated conclusion of that first half of that interview, it airs, that show, Daily Zeitgeist, it airs 5 new episodes a week and is a fantastic way to find new comedians and such, and just a really cool way to get the like a recap of the news and whatnot. Also, listen to Knowledge Fight. I'll definitely talk about this more in the future. It's about Alex Jones. I realize he's kind of irrelevant these days, but still, it's hilarious and great. They're a fairly smallish show, so please check that out. It's hosted by a guy who, he majored in formal logic, so it's really fun to hear him sort of break down all the many, many, many ways that the illogic kind of reigns on that show. And they talk about a lot of other cool stuff, and it's just a lot of fun. Sound clips of Alex Jones, they never get old. They're like almost 500 episodes into that show. I've listened to every single one of them, and I never get sick of it. They're great. So that's, Dan and Jordan's Knowledge Fight with Dan and Jordan. Awesome show. And like I said, I will go into more detail on that show in a future edition of Haas Recommends, and I'll probably every now and then play some clips because every week, just like there's at least one hilarious sound drop for that show that I'm like playing for all my friends and whatnot. Okay, so next, that covers podcasts for this week. I listen to a bazillion podcasts. So next, YouTube channels. The Surfs do some great educational and humorous content from the left side of the political spectrum. Lots of debunking of right-wing weirdos and ding-dongs. They're a slightly smaller channel who makes a strong effort to bring online left voices together. So please show them some love. That's The Surfs on YouTube. Also, Thought Slime. That's a one-person operation that, as he might say, owns bones. It's a nice, laid-back, often funny way to learn about leftist concepts. For instance, do you know what anarchism is as a political philosophy? He has several great videos on that very subject. I'll go more in depth with some YouTube channels when I haven't already spent 1,000 years recommending the greatest album of all time, Victory Lap by Propagandhi, to you. Next, documentaries. While it isn't explicitly leftist, I reticently recommend Filthy Rich, the Jeffrey Epstein documentary limited series on Netflix. It will not only prove to you that monsters exist, but also that the darkest, most depraved human behavior imaginable can be enabled by the insane wealth it's possible to acquire under our corrupt capitalist system. Content warning on this one, especially if you have kids. You know you probably don't want details about the whole Jeffrey Epstein saga if you have kids, or if you're just easily triggered by this subject matter. It's just new and in the headlines with Ghislaine or Ghislaine Maxwell's recent arrest and all, but again, it involves discussing much of it firsthand victim accounts of sexual abuse of children and is harrowing to say the least, so big content warning on that one, but very informative and interesting and just fascinating, horrible, horrible thing to see. But yeah, I don't think anybody needs to see it. Another documentary type thing I'm going to wreck here is the Zeitgeist series. Not to be confused with the aforementioned Daily Zeitgeist podcast, two totally different things. I watched these documentaries a long time ago and recently rewatched part one. Documentaries is kind of in air quotes here. They are these fantastic in-depth critiques of capitalism and modern culture / socio-political structures, though they do express a few ill-advised ideas that the sort of auteur behind the series, Peter Joseph, has since tried to distance himself from some 9/11 stuff, but it's best to think of the Zeitgeist movies as part of a sort of leftist art project and go into look into the ideas on your own later. Definitely going to do a rewatch and some in-depth discussions of this series with my rotating cast of podcast pals in the future. And that's going to be on Breadsheet. Finally, my dear mind freaks, I'm going to recommend one of my very first left-wing books I ever read under the advisement of the liner notes of an Anti-Flag album, I believe. Anyone who wants to know about why we lefties see the world the way we do, why we're so critical of the sort of Disneyfied history we're presented with in school and is taken for granted by mainstream culture, you need to read A People's History of the United States by Howard Zinn, which has been part of the leftist starter kit since it was first published, I think around 1980. It was last revised and updated in 2009. I'm currently rereading that version, and it is very, very good. Fascinating book. It basically, the idea of A People's History of the United States by Howard Zinn is that it is United States history told from the perspective of the people who didn't write the history books, like, basically all white men. It's told from the perspective of black people, of slaves, Native Americans, women, gay people, poor people. Like I said, just not the rich white men who actually wrote the version of history that we're usually sold, which is a fascinating and awesome concept for a book, and it will radicalize the shit out of you, I promise. I just started rereading that, so I'll definitely be basing some future episodes and YouTube vids and whatnot on what I encounter this time around through the book. First and last read this book when I was 15, so it was like 16 years ago, and only a few chapters into this reread, I'm finding that my far greater understanding of history, world affairs, politics, and just the ways the world operates are really making the book mean so much more, something so much more profound and applicable to me now. Read it. Haas says it's lit. Okay, folks, that does it for this week's amazing episode of Haas Recommends with a Z. And now, quickly, an edition of Haas Don't Recommend. The Hunt. As dumb and eye-rolly as the bullshit controversy around that movie was, it was still the most interesting thing about it. Okay, it was watchable. but it failed to be satire, though the string of references that it made, many of which already felt pretty dated, certainly communicated that the filmmakers thought they were very clever and indeed making a satire. I will say the lead actress, Betty Gilpin, was lots of fun to watch. She was really cool. Really, that was the only redeeming quality about the movie. It was kind of like a shittier version of The Purge. I mean, say what you will about those movies, they're fairly dumb and unsubtle, but at least they have something to say and are fairly consistent about saying it.
Happy 244th birthday, America. We is going through some growing pains on this one, aren't we? Yes, sir, yes, ma'am. It is hotter in more ways than one. But growing pains are a good thing because how the hell else are we gonna grow up? I think we gotta look each other in the eye. I think we gotta look ourselves in the eye. We gotta look in the mirror and ask ourselves, how can I be better? How can I expect more of myself and others? How can I be more responsible? How can I have more compassion? How can I have more courage? How can I be more fair? How do I make sure I wear the damn mask? We individually make these changes. That's how we make a collective change. That's how we get to next year's birthday and birthdays beyond that. And we start partying again. Looking around and saying, oh, yeah, we always got work to do. We never arrive. But we improved. That's our chance. That's our opportunity. That's on me. That's on you. It's game time. Ding, ding. We are in the ring, America. Let's quit messing about and get it done. Just keep living.
All right, my friends. So that is gonna conclude this mini-sode of Breadsheet. I wonder how many it's actually been. I've been going on for quite a minute, but let's see. I want to tell y'all how much I appreciate everyone's kind words about the first episode, as well as I appreciate your patience as I've squiggled and squoggled about. I had a bit of a medical emergency a couple days ago, which isn't really hindering my ability to do this stuff. It just got me real stressed and depressed and not feeling so much like being a goofy weirdo on the internet. But, you know, that feeling has obviously come back. So please rate this show 5 stars on whatever podcast app you use. Write a review. Those things help a lot with getting us up in the charts. Also follow me on Twitter at Haas_Bossman. Check out my YouTube channel that's also called Haas Bossman. And if you'd like to show some financial support, again, please go to the KMAX, THEKMACKS.bandcamp.com and buy an album. Name your price, preferably as much as you feel comfortable giving. And know that I recommend our album Tobacco and Firearms, of the ones that are on there. I've also set up a Patreon page, which you can find, but I'm not going to actively promote that until I have some more listeners, viewers, and my old band, the K-Max, has finished paying off some debts and such. If, you know, more listeners and viewers do wind up coming along, we'll see. I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing. And, so speaking of Tobacco and Firearms, by my old band, the K-Max, I'm going to ride out of this episode by playing the title track from that album. It's about being disillusioned after a few years of Obama being president. Thanks again, y'all. Stay safe. Wear your mask. Be nice. Fill other sentient beings with pure, healing light energy. Defund the police. Abolish prisons. Destroy capitalism. Eat the rich. And Black Lives Matter. Peace.
Just my want something, wanting reflection, since hate never ventures to cease. Now might be a time signal bells down the line. The intent of our struggle was peace.